Hey everyone, it's Tom Seymour from VHS Massacre Radio. Just doing some updates and wanted to talk about a few different things. One of the things that people have talked to me about is this idea of film school. Should I go to film school? Should I not go into film school? So let me talk about myself initially, just to kind of get the ball rolling. I initially went to a community college, and I went to community college for visual communication. And that was the concentration was film, but that was the name of the degree. When I graduated, it was like mid to late 90s. It was 98, right? So the only thing that was in Connecticut at the time was the WWF way down in Stamford, and then in my area there was news. There was this affiliate, CBS, NBC, ABC, and then ESPN. Like, I knew that I was going to be an underdog with an AS degree in the market, because you have all these people who've gone to really expensive film schools and you're competing in the same jobs. And sometimes that's within film production or media communication. So I might be competing with someone for the same job. So I volunteered for public access. Public access was still going strong. To some degree it is in New York. There's a lot of public access stations. So I volunteered to work on a program, and I did that while I was going to school, and I was making my little short films on Super 8, VHS, and I think at some point it was High 8. In college we're mostly using video, and we really had to teach ourselves how to change out film. So I bought a few different books on filmmaking. One was technical, on how to meter film and things like that, and then Robert Rodriguez's Rebel Without a Crew. At the time there were now there's books that are pretty good, like Shut Up and Shoot is one where it's a little down and dirty, it's a little more contemporary, but at the time there wasn't a lot out there on how to do it for almost nothing. So our first 16mm feature film was 90 minutes long, and it was a comedic drama, and it was called Everything Moves Alone, and I did it with Mike Oransky and Phil Garrett. We shot on an Aton 16mm camera, and then we edited it. We had it transferred to High 8 at the time, because that's the only deck we had available, and then we cut the footage from there. And it did okay. It got some good reviews, and it played in the Pioneer Theater in New York for a couple weeks. All that was enough for me to get this job at CBS as initially it was called a vacation relief editor. And what I would do is I would fill in for people who called out sick or on vacation. So I would get called really last minute at 3 a.m, 4 a.m. to come in and edit the news. You'd edit the news through the night so that it went on at 5 or 6 a.m. So that was for CBS, and at that time there was big blocks of news in the morning. I forget exactly, but it was from 7 to 10 p.m. was just a lot of news. And so I did that for a year and a half, proved myself, and eventually got hired as a full-time staff editor. To some degree, I feel like I bucked the odds in that way. But, I feel like I hedged my bets to some degree by having such a desire to go out there and do stuff on my own and volunteer for things like public access and stuff like that. So I think the big message there is the degree is one factor in a lot of factors. So you can't just go out and get the degree and expect to have a job. You need to be hedging your bets in there, volunteering on film sets, volunteering wherever you can. Public access was broadcast experience, and at that time it was pretty much the only other place you could get broadcast experience. It's starting out on a starting level. So you have to look into that. And so you're saying, okay, well, that's the past, although public access still exists, and it still probably is a good way to get broadcast experience and make your way into working in the media if that's what you want to do. You're saying, okay, well, what about nowadays? Most of the stuff is digital. And it's true. When I was working at Channel 3, there were these stringers Stringers is like people who would go, and if there was a fire going on, they'd grab their video equipment, shoot the fire, come to CBS, and try to, sell the footage. So, there are things on CNN where you can upload your own content, things like that. That could be a good way to start the ball rolling. Like, don't just dump things on YouTube unless you're really planning strategically to make a channel and to deliver consistent content that you can do in a powerful way. Maybe get a group of people together and really try to go for it. Beyond that, if you want a career to make money, you're probably going to have to work within the system, and as a network in the studio system. And a lot of the times those jobs are not incredibly fun. Like maybe you're logging video, or maybe you're shooting stuff that you don't want to be shooting, or editing stuff that you don't want to be editing. People get sort of enamored by the idea of the entertainment industry. Most of the time you're using your creative energy to create something that is not yours, and that can be really frustrating. I did it for 12 years. Eventually I'd want to move on to NBC Universal, Black 20, IGN, College Humor, but I always made independent films in the meantime. So back to the main question here, like, should you go to film school or should you not? I think film school is a good idea. I will quote Joe Bob Briggs on this. You don't have to go to NYU. There are other state universities that are very reasonably priced, but you need to learn things like apertures and film lenses and how to light and how to block and how to match your audio levels and how to cut things together. You could watch through a bunch of YouTube videos and you definitely can learn skills, but in a college setting, you're getting all that stuff. You're working in peer groups, and you're actually working on larger productions where you're building production classes out of the students. You're learning from people in the field, and you're rounding out your skills in an even way. The problem with just volunteering on film sets is, that sometimes you'll be stuck getting coffee. And you never even get near the camera. I was lucky on one of my first film shoots that I was on. I got to be a camera PA, and then so I learned about lenses and changing out film and stuff like that. And it was, it was a pretty interesting experience. So it's not that you can't learn almost everything that you're going to learn on film set. You can learn in film school, but then you're also getting some theory. It does matter. It is important that you read a few books. It is important that you learn about the history of film, because you really might get turned on to something that happened, 50 or 60 years ago. Like, what if you loved Dario Argento horror films because of the dynamic lighting, and all the cool gels they're using, Or what if, you watch Metropolis or Tarkovsky, or you get blown away by something that you've never seen before. But hopefully, if it's film production, you're getting more on the production side. And I do have a beef with film production programs that offer too much theory, because that is a different line. Cinema studies versus film production. So film production is a practitioner. Cinema studies is the study of history of film, and that goes all the way up to PhD. So it would be a BA in cinema studies, an MA in cinema studies, a PhD in cinema studies. It's all theory and research, and it's not production. So in production, you can have an AS, you can have a BA in film production, and you can have an M.F.A. in film production. And a lot of people don't really know what the difference is. If you look that up, if you're like, oh, what's the difference between an M.F.A. and a PhD? Creative writing and then English PhD will always pop up, and in the MFA is creative writing, and then the English PhD is about it's a research degree, but it's also about English. It's like the history of the English language and all its applications, and then the MFA would be actively creative writing people. People do think that an MFA is like an MA, and it's not at all. So typically a master's degree could be just 10 classes, maybe it's 30 credits. And a lot of MFAs are about 60 credits. Like I'm going a Hunter now, it's 48 credits plus a residence plus your thesis. And so it ends up being about 60 credits. So what happens is a lot of MFAs take like 3 years, and a PhD could take longer, 4 or 5. And there is debate between which degree is, more thorough. People with PhDs are all, they're always going to be like, oh no, the PhD is, the best, But this is the thing, within film production, there's no such thing as a PhD. So you have cinema studies, PhD, film production, MFA. And so in that regard, typically, if you have an MFA and you want to teach at a university, the MFA is a PhD equivalent within certain disciplines because there is no higher education. They call it a terminal degree. So in result, you become a professor if you have an MFA and you're teaching film production. If you had a PhD in cinema studies, you wouldn't typically be teaching any film production, although some people do because they're that versatile. Typically, you're going to be teaching history of film. It's to some degree it's a history degree and a research degree. Okay, so that was a really long way to talk about this stuff. You can make great films without a degree, and if you look at the division of genius filmmakers who went to school and genius filmmakers who didn't go to school, it's 50-50. People like Robert Rodriguez and Christopher Nolan, I think Nolan got an English degree and Rodriguez got a communications and media degree. For some reason, they don't count that because that's not film school, right? So okay. So then on the other side, you got people who did go to film school, Scorsese or Spike Lee and Tarkovsky. Film school can't lay claim to all the geniuses out there. I really think it's all about how you want to take in the information. How hard it is to get into a school is some of the value of the degree. So if you're in a really exclusive program and people know about it, then yeah, that's valuable. And your peer groups may be more accomplished as well if they get into that, because maybe their undergrad GPA was really good, and then you could have access to certain things, like the Hunter program that I'm in. They had worked with the National Board of Review. They had worked with NYC Docs. They have other relationships with Columbia, and get connections potentially from going to film school. But, I think the debate is like, I went to NYU and I spent $250,000 on a BA in film production. If you can afford to do that, then that's awesome. You can go to Brooklyn Film School, and it's part of CUNY, and it's cheap. If your GPA is a little higher, then you can go to Hunter Film School, and it's a solid film school, and then their MFA programs are some of the best in the world. So you really have to look at what works for you.